It's all about the macro productions.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tac-Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Swartz.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles and Fort Lauderdale?
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the Sears hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you're watching us on Rockfin or Rumble, or you're listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks so much. We appreciate your support. If you haven't rated the show, go ahead and do that real quick. If you think we've earned 5 stars, we appreciate it. Do it for all the shows that you like. It helps with the algorithm, so we'll fight that battle as best we can. If you want to connect with me, macroaggressions.io is the website. You can go to activistpost.com. I hope you are already. Bookmark that for your news, your daily news, and naturalblaze.com as well for anything related to alternative health. We can't do this show without the help of our sponsors. Legal Shield has been in business for 50 years in the United States and Canada. They'll get you access to an attorney in your area for a very reasonable price of $1 a day, $30 a month. Seriously, it's the best money you'll spend. If you need your documents done, like a will, medical directive, a financial power of attorney, it's a great source for that. You can knock that out in the first month, and it'll pay itself off for the next couple of years. I highly recommend people do that. If you're somebody that runs a small business, they have a small business program. If you carry a gun, they have documentation for that as well. So there's a lot going on. I think the best thing people can do is just go to the website and check it out and see what you think for yourself. Go to www.don'tgetpushedaround.com and you'll find everything that you need to know about it. You'll get an app on your phone. It's simple to use. It's really just about the smartest thing you can do, especially if you are somebody who does not have legal representation. It kind of levels the playing field a little bit for us. They tell us we have equal representation under the law, but I don't think anybody really believes that. If you've got a good lawyer, things tend to go your way. So if you need one, we've got them. Don'tGetPushedAround.com. Check it out. There's one in your area in the United States and Canada. And also, have you gone to shopc60.com to check out C60 Power? It's been a sponsor of ours for a very long time. It's the most powerful antioxidant known. It's hundreds of times more powerful than conventional antioxidants. For those of you watching, Ken is holding up a bottle of it. It's a free radical scavenger. It's a buckyball. It's a carbon-60 atom that roams your body looking for free radicals and capturing them and resetting itself over and over again. It's fantastic. The best thing you can do is to go to shopc60.com and read about it. If you're somebody that has a pet, maybe an older pet, I'll tell you this right now. I can give you just a little insight. My morning routine starts with this. I get up in the morning, I go into my bathroom, and my cat follows me in there. My cat sits on the back of my toilet and patiently waits for me to fill up a spoon with C60, prefers the avocado, but will most definitely take the coconut as well. And I hold the spoon I've got 3 cats, but only one of them will do it. So this cat loves it. So I swear to God, every single morning, this is what I have to do for this cat. So, and there's a pet formula too. So if you're interested, you can go to shopc60.com. And if you find something that you like, the discount code on your way out the door is macro. I have to read this. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate any disease. Go to shopc60.com and find out more about it. What a coincidence. We have the co-founder and chairman of C60 Power with us back again, Ken the scientist. Hey, Ken, how are you? Good to see you.
Doing pretty good. Oh, by the way, just for full disclosure, I have Legal Shield too.
Oh, good. Well, there you go. So you know what I'm talking about. I've got, the C60 products are great. Thank you for sending them over. We're working on a great landing page right now. We've got some photos that we shot last Sunday, and they're going to get incorporated into the landing page. So as soon as we can, we'll get that up and running for people that are interested in that. But we're not actually going to talk too much about C60 Power, although we could. Whenever I have you on, I want to talk about crazy scientist type stuff. What are you've taken a back seat from C60 Power now, kind of turn the reins over and focusing on Moxie Fusion. Can we talk a little bit about that? What is Moxie Fusion? And
its whole name is metal oxygen fusion.
Okay.
And MOX is already taken. That's in the fission field. So we took MOXY, which is Moxie, and it has another double meaning in the name. So we thought that was what it is. And it's basically billions of times easier to fuse a metal with an oxygen than it is to, like, say, do 2 deuteriums in a conventional fusion type reactor that's really never worked.
What do you use it for?
Well, you can basically synthesize new metals out of old metals, and you can also use it to make energy. And in fact, there's usually what they called cold fusion. You remember that back in the 1989s. That was Fleischmann and Pons. And these days they call it Lenner. But, one of the problems is they've never been able to really understand what's going on or to easily reproduce it. Yeah. Well, it's pretty much all Moxie fusion. And once you know how to do Moxie fusion, then it's easy to reproduce. In fact, we published our paper on what we did, and then a group called the Scotia Group published a paper. And so we have really good third-party verification on that. And so that's kind of to start it off to kind of do it. Now, the real story probably for this starts with back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, before I was even born. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 Japanese scientists named Osawa and Kushi. And basically what they did is they had a yin-yang thing going on where, one side of the atomic chart, I think yin is the one that likes to give it away and the yang's that like to take it, or however it is. And so one side of the atomic charts is yin and the other side is yang. And by putting them together in a argon neutral environment, they basically, what they were doing is the experiment that they showed is they basically took a sodium street lamp, made a different type of bulb, and they basically put in that bulb sodium, an equal amount of oxygen, and then argon as well as a moderator. The argon doesn't interact or fuse; it's kind of drives the reaction. And so basically they would put that in there. They turned it on, and you would see through a small quartz window. It's a very strong ceramic bulb, not like the ones you would see at a sodium street lamp. And basically they'd turn it on, and you would see that kind of yellowish orange glow that we all know from a sodium street lamp. And after several hours, it would turn purple. And purple is the color of potassium, which is the next element up. And if you took sodium and you fused it with oxygen, you would make potassium. And so that's essentially what they did. And they sort of, that was the proving of the whole concept of this. And the thing is, it's easily reproducible. Now, we did a little bit different on our experimentation, because this happened back in I guess, the 2000s. I think it was, we started probably 2006 and stuff like that on this. And basically, we didn't use sodium. What we used is we used oxygen and deuterium. Now, deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen. It has an extra neutron. And this method would give you the highest energy yield, because we're thinking on making it as a energy producer and a replacement for fission reactors, which tend to melt down, as Fukushima has shown, and be a real problem. Right. You wouldn't have that with a fusion reactor, because once you flip the switch, any reactions would stop. And Moxie fusion doesn't make any radioactive waste. So basically, what we did is we took oxygen-16 and we fused it with deuterium, and that made fluoride 18. In fact, we got a little thing here. Let's see if for those of you listening, I'm also going to there. For those that can see it, you can see the top one is what Osawa and Kushi did. They basically took sodium, fused it to make potassium. What we did is the second one. We basically took deuterium, and we make fluoride 18, and then fluoride 18 is unstable, so it decays by releasing an X-ray. It's an electron capture. That means it pulls an electron out of its shell and turns into an oxygen 18 and releases a little bit of heat energy and an X-ray. And the other one on the bottom, there's a lot of oxygen 18 in our heavy water mixture, so we can also make neon 20. But so there's a variety of atomics, and we did that on a reactor. In fact, I used the Tesla method, so it worked the very first time. And I think we published our paper after we did a bunch of third-party verifications down at TSA Systems, by the way. They make all the TSA Systems makes all the radiation detectors for like the TSA. And so they had it's a private corporation, but on the weekends, nobody's around. So we would go down, Tim would let us in, and we'd use their excellent 50-channel spectral analyzer. So we went during our third-party verifications. And I think we published our paper in 2014 on ResearchGate. In fact, anybody listening right now to go with this talk, you probably could go look up MOXY fusion ResearchGate on any of your search engines, and you can easily pull up the paper. ResearchGate is kind of like a open source science thing.
So, okay, so you can make energy doing this, yes?
Oh, absolutely. We'd have, when we were doing third-party verifications, we had a little tiny reactor, right? It's just, and we'd have to like cover it in buckets of ice just during the third-party verification, because it would heat up so much, the gas would become too thin. So, and then what happened was we published in 2014, and about 2021, another company actually had read our paper, and they reproduced our experimentation. Because what we were doing is we were basically verifying Osawa's and Kushi's original discovery, right? We basically redid exactly their protocol. Sure, sodium and hydrogen are in the same atomic family chart. They're they're just in the same vertically. And so you can so we did, because sodium hydroxide is a rather nasty caustic substance, and so we didn't want to work with that. And hydrogen anyway, and the deuterium would be the highest energy yield. So that's why we did that. And they did a paper. I'll just put it up there so people can see it. And for your audience that's listening and doesn't have it, it's they on ResearchGate they published experiments demonstrating the creation of elements via pulsed electric field in water and deuterionated water, applications for the production of fluoride. And they were going to use, they put a patent in, but they abandoned it. They were going to make oxygen fluoride 18. And usually the fluoride 18 is made in particle accelerators. They take deuterium or some other elements, and they slam it into oxygen, and they make this fluoride 18, and it has a certain half-life, and then it's easy to extract out. Then they put it in certain sugars, and then they inject those sugars into people, and it's for ontology, cancer. And because cancer really loves sugar, so sugar would suck up the cancers would suck up the sugar with the fluoride 18 in it. And usually fluoride 18, when it's made in accelerators, it decays and makes a positron. And that's like an antimatter electron. And then that positron would hit with an electron and produce a 510 kilovolt radiation, which they use. But Moxie fusion is a totally different process. And so you lower the Coulomb barrier. That's the energy it takes to fuse atoms together. And so the resulting energy comes out in the X-ray band, not in the gamma ray band. And in fact, that's the reason that C60 came about, my whole C60 company and everything.
Right.
Because, there was a lot of late doctors and professors associated with this kind of research. And we figured, of course, I figured out it was because of the X-ray band problem there. And see, they were walking, Geiger counters measure gamma rays. So these guys are doing this type of fusion, and they're walking around with Geiger counters, which don't measure X-rays. And that's why it's the late Fleischmann and late Dr. Pons.
They're all dead.
And the late Dr. Bass. Yeah, they're all dead because they didn't do that. And another thing, like if you, I'll just kind of go over stuff. If you've pulled that up, like one of the things on the Fleischmann and Pons and a lot of the other stuff, this is, dangerous stuff to do, because on one of the things, they were thinking, the whole cold fusion guys, they were thinking they were packing deuterium in the palladium or platinum lattice, and then it was fusing into helium because they would detect helium-4. Well, what was really happening, it was doing this. Depending on what you do, for those people listening, you would take palladium and it would fuse with oxygen to make a radioactive xenon, which is an alpha emitter, or also sometimes positrons. And then also they would do the platinum with oxygen, and that it was fusing into radon. And you know all about radon.
Yeah. And
how you want to make your basement. So basically, some researcher at one time, I don't know why he thought of it, but he did. And so what he did is he got one of those electrolytic cells that's supposedly doing cold fusion. In your little radon, you have in your basement, you have these little detectors that detect radon. Well, there's a little P49 plastic resin chip in there. It's very small. Mm-hmm. And basically, when you tear open the thing and lets the air in there, when radon decays, it releases an alpha particle. That's really a hot helium nucleus, 2 protons, 2 neutrons. And if it slams into this little piece of plastic, and then they take that piece of plastic later and they soak it in sodium hydroxide, it'll tell you how much radon is in your basement from those alpha decays. And so what this guy did is he put a bunch of those little P39 chips in there. You can kind of see it here. This isn't a color copy, so it's not as good. You can see kind of a few pits in that one, right? And so it wasn't doing that. But after they basically had it hang out there for several hours. And if we can see here on this one, and you can see all the pits in that little P39 chip. Yeah, so basically that was the other reason why it's the late Dr. Fleischmann and Pons, is that it was 100 times worse than your worst radon basement. Because what was happening, they were detecting helium-4, but the helium-4 wasn't from the deuterium fusing, it was from the radon emitting alpha particles, hot alpha particles, which then cool down into helium nuclei, helium atoms. They grab a couple electrons. And so they were basically breathing, because an electrolytic cell, it's got 2 electrodes in there, the cathode, anode, and oxygen and hydrogen, or in this case deuterium, are coming out into the laboratory air along with a lot of radon, hundreds of times your worst radon basement. Oops. So that's so it is dangerous, and it produces a lot of X-rays. And so if you're gonna do this, then you need to do it. But it's something that you could do in the Fleischmann and Pons. They basically were using a sodium street lamp power supply. But really, what comes to it, I kind of talked about our. I've shown you ours, but I'll show our one. And what we did is basically, when we did ours, we basically followed the Osawa and Kushi. Of course, we had also some other detectors, but if you see up here, we used our friend Gary Rodriguez. His brother was a dentist, so we got X-ray dental plates from his brothers, and you can see an X-ray dental plate on the top, right? It's perfectly white. And it took only a few seconds after we turned on our reactor, and you look at the bottom plate, it's totally saturated. That happened in just a minute. And we have made several of these. Actually, we got a whole lot of these fusion reactors we built as test things, and we give away to people. By hopefully institutions, governments, responsible researchers. But but the thing is, you got to realize this, if you're, because we sent one of these to a couple of really old hot nuke guys, and like we have a safety page right on the first one that this is this kind of Moxie fusion, metal oxygen fusion. It lowers the Coulomb barrier, so it puts out in the X-ray band, not in the gamma ray band. But we sent it to a couple old nuke guys, and they call us up and tell us, on the safety page, we say you got to have X-ray dosimeters, right? You have to have X-ray plates, X-ray films, because we use 5,000 volts, and that's below the threshold that X-rays are produced by electrons hitting metal. So you can't say, and we also run it off 2 small batteries. It doesn't cost $1 billion to build a Moxie fusion reactor, okay, that works. And so these guys call us up and tell us, oh, it's not working. We're not detecting any gamma rays, the 510 kilovolts. Well, that doesn't happen. It's in the X-ray band, dudes, and these guys did not listen to our safety protocols, did not do that stuff, and here they are just cooking themselves away like the rest of those PhDs because they didn't understand it. And I can get part of that is there's a thing called rhenium-187. This is an example of it. Rhenium-187 is this radioactive element takes 43.3 billion years as a half-life. That's the time it takes half of it to disappear, right? And that's a long time, and that's what they use. It's found in zircons, little zirconiums, that you've sort of like this kind of, it's the second hardest thing to diamond, so there's a lot of beach sand. So really ancient granites produce zircons, and then you find those zircons, and then you can date them, and that'll tell you how old the granite is, right? Well, when you totally strip off all the electrons of zirconium, or rhenium-187, it lowers the half-life to 33 years. And the beta ray that comes out is so weak it gets caught in the K band. That's the lowest electron orbital. And so it's just showing you, and also it would be putting out in the X-ray band. But some of these hot scientists, hot fusion scientists, they just can't grasp the concept that there could be another type of fusion process. So they're just sitting there with their Geiger counters, cooking themselves with X-rays. Yeah. Oh well.
Wishing they had some C60 to keep themselves
that's
from dying.
That is why we did, because basically they had C60. They basically, I went out and looked for extra radiation protection because, it could be something else. We figured it was the X-rays, but, you never know, right? So I went and found the stuff carbon-60. They gave it to one set of rats. The control group didn't. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. The C60 rats lived while the control rats died. So we had a couple sources of that. And about 7 months after using C60, I went in to see my optometrist, and my DRUES, or dry macular degeneration, an incurable disease, by the way, had completely disappeared, and it remains gone today.
Wow.
That's and crazy. Then my electrical engineer, Gary Rodriguez, he had severe wet macular degeneration. It was so bad he was going to have to abandon his career as an electrical engineer, right? And that's not good. So I made a preparation of C60 in MCT oil, because as people out there may know, medium chain triglycerides can be turned into ketones by your liver very rapidly, and that acts as a flex fuel for your cells if you've got like type 2 diabetes, because it's way better than a chocolate bar, right? Glucose won't go in, but MCTs, because it's your liver turns it into a ketone, and then your cells can run off that ketone. So if you do have that type, taking MCT is a really good idea. And he took a tablespoon of that for about 15 months, and his severe wet macular degeneration went completely away, and his type 2 diabetes, which was probably the underlying cause of it, went subclinical. Wow. And that kind of started the whole company. So I started, because going blind sucks. So I started making it for friends, family, and myself. And then I shared it with alternative healthcare practitioners, and they had great results, and they gave it to their customers. And I was like a C60 milkman driving around the Front Range here in Colorado. And then one day, Cliff High mentioned how it had saved his and his wife's life on Sarah Westall's program. And at that point, just the whole thing blew up. In fact, the whole C60 market, that's what created the C60 market there. Before, it was just like a few thousand people, weirdo scientist type guys that were using it. Yeah. And now it's like hundreds of thousands now are using it.
It's amazing. My cat loves it, man. I don't know. My cat, I don't know if she likes the taste. I don't know if she knows that it makes her feel better. I don't know. But that one cat, she's addicted to it. Do we have free energy? Is it something that we
well, it's not free energy, but you can now make it. And in fact, I'll get a little more, but this is something people can do in their garage. And that they like this is maybe just make sure the name is pronounced right. But during this thing, that we're not the only ones that are doing this. This people I mentioned before, scientists have been talking about that. And back in 2004, a couple scientists, what they did is they basically had an electrolytic cell, and they were blasting energy through it, and it had tungsten electrodes. And it was Yorio and Carrillo, 2004. And this is, after it was done, this is when they did the spectral analyze, new elements had appeared. And as you know, some of you may know what AU stands for. It stands for gold. And so Yorio and Carrillo, back in 2004, were basically taking tungsten oxide and turning it into gold. And but there was also making a little bit of osmium. And because tungsten has 4 isotopes. So when the different isotope is the same number of protons, right? Because so it still stays tungsten, but it has different number of neutrons. So when you fuse oxygen 16 or 18 to those, you're going to get different elements, right? So in one of the pathways, you make gold. Another pathway makes osmium. And then there's another pathway, it's interesting, and it fuses up to something, but it's unstable. And then it breaks apart in fission. That's when it breaks apart. It breaks apart into thulium, which is a rare earth metal, and a beryllium. And beryllium is only created by, right down there in the corner, it's created by, only created in fission. So basically, and it also makes a little bit of we get triple alpha decay, which is carbon atoms are made as well. And sometimes, and the beryllium is basically 2 alpha decay with an extra neutron. So we have, they're here making gold. And yeah, and it's see, the thing is, they're
killed.
Yeah. Well, it's already happening, let me say, around the world. Let's say people, they've downloaded my paper thousands of times, almost 10,000 times. And I've probably hundreds of thousands of people heard me talk about this before. And it's a really basically simple process to do. All you really need here, what you do is you get your variable transformer, and then you got your bridge diode. Then you attach it to your sodium street lamp power supply. This is using the Osawa-Kushi method. And, there's whole warehouses full of old sodium street lamp power supplies because they've all been replaced by LEDs, so you can get them up really cheap. And then you just kind of make a little reactor there down below, and you basically got an anode and a cathode. And what you want to do is you basically just, you're getting your electrons flooding off the cathode in a pressurized argon atmosphere. That's what drives it. See, and the way Yorio and Carrillo did it, it's really primitive. But when you use pressurized argon atmosphere, you're basically just putting electric sparks through what is a tungsten oxide. And as the sparks move through the tungsten oxide and the pressurized argon, they will convert it into all of those metals. But you have to be careful. This is already happening. Let's say maybe someplace, somebody's making kilograms a week, but I'm not going to talk. And you have to be careful because it's going to make a whole bunch of X-rays. It's also going to make a bunch of osmium. Now, osmium tetroxide is a very toxic substance. So and beryllium isn't particularly healthy for you either. So, this is not for you have to be an educated amateur if you're going to play this game. Yeah. Because you can metal toxicity. Also, you can X-ray yourself, and in some cases, you could probably produce some radioactive short-lived noble gases. So
great. I'll leave the science.
Doable. I mean,
I'll leave the science to the scientists.
One of the things, if we're talking about the free energy side of things, remember that Stanley Myers?
Yeah.
Who died in the Cracker Barrel parking lot?
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a whole story on that. I think I sent you some. You could maybe post down below in the notes where people can link to that. And I would give a talk on Moxie fusion.
Sure.
And this guy comes up to me after the talk, and he's saying he worked for Stanley Meyer when he was running this. He basically had a dune buggy that was over Unity, and there lots of scientists were there and looked at it, right? And it really was an over Unity device, but nobody could figure out how it worked, right? And so this guy came up to me, and he was working with Stanley Meyer during the time when he had the over Unity dune buggy. And what he told me was there was a you can get the patents and you can do it. He had this neutral gas. Now, he told everybody it was nitrogen, but the guy told me, no, it was just like what you were doing. He used argon gas, and he had like a little tank in the back of his dune buggy that had this argon gas, and the water he used, he didn't use regular water, he used heavy water, which is deuterium oxide. And as long as the argon gas lasted, his little dune buggy was over unity. That means it was producing more energy than was going in. He could drive it around because there was only a small battery in there, right? Breaking it up. It was doing an HHO, but a DDO, right? Which is because it was using pure heavy water. And that's why he had fuel injectors in it. Because usually with electrolytic cell, if you do electrolytic cell, you're going to get the hydrogen out one side, the oxygen out the other, and the deuterium stays behind. That's how you actually concentrate heavy water. What he did is he had fuel injectors into the cylinder, so that deuterium, even perhaps hydrogen mixture, would go in there, and the little tube with a wire in it, so he'd flash it all into DDO or HHO, and then it would go into the cylinder and be burnt. So basically, Stanley Meyer created a Moxie fusion reactor using an internal combustion engine.
Shit.
Now, if he had only closed looped it, like if he'd taken the exhaust, because what happened was once he had the bottle of argon in the back of the seat, ran out, stopped being over unity, right? That's a problem. So if he had just closed looped the whole thing and stuck an electric generator on his motor, well, he'd have an over unity Moxie fusion reactor generating electricity. Maybe somebody's doing that out there right now. Yes,
and that's what got him killed.
Yeah, but now you know. And he was always secretive. Hid it in his patents, right? He'd always try to deceive people, which is why one of the reasons he didn't get his patent. But I've in the links below, you can see his patents and how he made his fuel injectors and everything you need to know to do it yourself. And somebody out there might actually be doing it right at this moment. So go for it. And you can get an idea. One more thing, like the cost of producing gold, the inputs are way under $100 an ounce.
Oh.
And we know that from Dr. Bass. Now, there was a Dr. Bass, and it's at the very end of the paper. I don't really have any images for that. But he was taking 1/10 of a gram of thorium using the electrolytic method, which is basically the method that Yorye and Crelio do, which is not the most efficient method, by the way. And he was fission fusioning Moxie. He didn't know what he was doing, right? But he was getting the results. He would basically turning 1/10 of a gram of thorium into tin and copper isotopes for 300 watts, right? 300 watts, like a kilowatt costs 20 cents. So if you get the electricity cost, the input cost, it's all under $100 to make an ounce of pretty much whatever you want. So, yeah. Anyway.
Let's talk about NASA since it got you here. I love NASA for obvious reasons. They're such just pathological liars, I guess. I don't know. They're running a huge scam.
Never a straight answer.
Never a straight answer is the chapter I've got in the Octopus book about NASA. It's so much fun to pick on them. What is the real story of Apollo 13?
Oh, well, you see, my dad had been involved in the Apollo program right at the beginning, because he made the Genie missile. He ran the Genie missile project. That was like a air-to-air missile with a 3-kiloton nuke on it. It was actually, according to the, you can actually see him fly wingman on the original shot. It's on YouTube. And they said it was to go shoot down Russian bombers or Soviet bombers, like if they invaded. They made 3,000 of them. And the Soviets didn't even have 100 bombers. So it was actually designed to shoot down UFOs. And it kept getting sabotaged. They put my dad in it. It was we'll talk about that story some other time. It was like aliens sabotaging a U.S. military project. It's a pretty interesting story. So he was there, and also in Bluegill Prime, he was like the Air Force expert on Thor missile, and they used Thor missile also on Dinosaur and stuff. So they had a problem with the Saturn V first stage. It was the engines weren't getting enough thrust to get us to the moon. They needed 4% more thrust. And so they've been having problems. So the Air Force, I guess, sent my dad in there to help Werner von Braun get it done. And so he was there 6 months. He'd sit at the table with Werner and 11 other Germans, and they'd be talking. And like when he looked at the model of the Saturn V, he just told Werner von Braun, "That looks just like a bunch of V2s wrapped together." And Werner von Braun said, "That is exactly what it is." And but the thing about it was, actually, my dad can't be given credit for that. But what happened? They were doing they've been working for 6 months doing all these tests, this test and that test, trying to find ways to increase the the thrust in the engine. And one day, one of the fuel pumps broke. The shaft snapped, and so it was just kind of spinning free in the housing. And they got 7% more thrust, and that's how we went to the moon.
Okay.
So he kind of had contacts inside of the whole Apollo program, because once that was done, he went off, did something else, right? Because he was just there as a liaison. And so what happened on the Apollo 13 program, they always, why did the oxygen cylinder wake up? Well, my dad knew these people. What had happened is when they were taking the oxygen cylinder off the rack where it was on, it fell off and hit the ground, the concrete, right? And I think I broke the story on this, but NASA came out and said, oh, it fell 2 inches. No, it didn't. It fell like 3 feet or more. And then they looked at it and they said, oh, it looks good to me. They put it back on the pallet, and then they put it in the spacecraft. And of course, what people didn't know is there's a bunch of valving inside the cylinder that controls it, because you want it inside there. It's the way they did it back then, right? And obviously some of that valving had been broken, but you couldn't see it was broken because it was inside the cylinder. So they stuck it in, and that was this poor quality control protocol, I guess you could say. Yeah. And so on the way to the moon, of course, it blew up, boom, and they were lucky to get them back. Yeah. So that was like one of the things. But I have all kinds of other NASA blunders that are kind of amusing.
Like the green screens and all the fuckery that they're doing. Every time I see the people in the ISS, the lady with her hair-sprayed hair, that's fun if you play that one at like triple speed. Her hair never moves. And then I saw that they did that a split screen next to the people that are in the vomit comet and that are doing the 0G, and their hair moves like naturally. And they ran them both at three times speed. The people in the vomit comet, their hair is like, the lady's hair is like flowing all over the place. The other lady's is exactly the same the entire time. It doesn't move at all. And you're just like, why are you guys faking this? At some point, the entire world is going to figure this out, that you guys are just a bunch of liars. Like, what is their problem?
Well, this was about the Mars Climate Orbiter. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah, what's that?
The Mars Climate Orbiter, they're going to send a little space probe to Mars, and it was supposed to get into orbit and do Mars climate, but it didn't get into orbit, and I can tell you the story why. And basically, they had launched it off to Mars, and Lockheed Martin had built it, right? And they how Lockheed Martin is always doing cost-cutting measures, to squeeze every last little penny out of whatever it is. And they had done one of those cost-cutting measures, and one of those quote buyouts. And so when you do that buyout thing, usually the competent guys who can get another job pretty quick, they go, right? And so what had happened is they'd done one of those periodic cost-squeezing measures, and all the competent scientists who actually built the thing, right, and were behind the Mars Polar Orbiter, they were left. They left, and all that was left, like in Lockheed Martin, is they had like the really, wet behind the ears kids. They just got out of college because they cost little, right? If you hire them right out of college, they're pretty cheap. And then they had the really old guys who were like the department head who's hanging on, to see how much he could squeeze extra out for his pension, because the longer you stay working. So what happened is JPL was the one running the Mars. They're the ones that actually do the navigation for NASA. And so they had and back in the old days, back in the 60s and 70s, and the days when people they're so old they're not even around anymore, is everybody did things in foot pounds, and that's kind of like an English measurement, like foots and yards and pounds, and it's basically the energy to move 1 pound 1 foot high, right? And of course, and back by that time, everybody had turned into it had gone into the Newton method, right? Newtonian, meters, liters, centimeters, all that kind, right? The metric system. And part of the metric system, they use newtons. And a newton is basically the amount of energy to move a kilogram, which is about 2.2 pounds, a meter high, which is about 3 feet. So as you can imagine, it's a lot more energy than a foot pound. And so the young guy JPL calls up then Nat calls up the guy at Lockheed Martin and asks him, well, because when you want to get into Mars orbit, what they want to do is they want to do a thing called aerobraking. Mm-hmm. And because it takes a lot of energy, if you had to fire the rockets, it'd take a lot. So what they do is they hit the atmosphere just a little bit to slow it down. And so they wanted to know how much energy we need to do to slow the probe down, just enough to touch the atmosphere exactly right. And the Lockheed Martin guy gave it to him in foot-pounds. And the JPL dude didn't even know what foot-pounds were, didn't even understand the whole thing was going on there. And so he punched it in as newtons. And, of course, we don't know if the Mars probe burnt up in the atmosphere or bounced off and is now orbiting, twisting somewhere in space. But that was the end of the Mars Polar Orbiter. It was like $300 million or something. I don't know.
Oh, well. Just a simple miscalculation. That sounds like NASA to me. Actually, yeah. It's actually quite perfect that they would mess that up.
That's not the only one. There's another one called Mars Polar Lander, and you probably never heard of it because it crashed. And that's where my new Newtonian gravitational formulations come in, which is we're getting into the landing on the moon and all that kind of stuff. Right. As one of the things is that Newton came up with a great idea. And what Newton did is he theoretically shrunk. He just theoretically shrunk all the mass and volume of everything in the moon into this infinitesimal point. And let's say you could shrink all the mass and volume into a theoretical point for the moon, right? And then you could measure the gravity between them or the gravity between Mars, right? And it made a quote, what they call a 0 point. And of course, from that 0 point, a perfectly spherical, theoretical gravitational field comes off of, right? But the problem is the Earth is not a perfectly spherical thing. It spins, right? The Earth spins on its axis, and because of that, the equatorial regions kind of bulge out a little bit more, and the poles are kind of a little flattened. So the distance between the poles is less than across the equator. And the name of that is called an oblate spheroid. The Earth's not perfectly spherical. So if you actually try to use Newtonian's formulations for calculating, let's say, gravity on the surface of the Earth, or even gravity while you're orbiting something in space, or anything like that, it doesn't work. It's not very good at doing that. And years and years ago, more than 25 years ago, I was working on my master's thesis. It was called The Retention of Magnetic Fields and Rotating Terrestrial Planets to the Actions of a Close Large Orbital Partner. I called it the Klopp theory. Basically what happens is the moon pulls the Earth's inner core off center. Mm-hmm. And because the Earth rotates faster than the moon orbits, it causes the inner core of the Earth to rotate faster than the rest of the planet. And I predicted that and have in my thesis before it was discovered. By the way, guys, you can go out and find that thesis someplace. Anyway, I could give it to you if you want it personally. Just send me an email. And so I had actually predicted that. And during that process, I was going to use the Newtonian formulas to do all these whistles and bells. And so, well, look at this, it's inside, the outside, anywhere. And I tried to use Newtonian, it just didn't work because it makes these perfect spherical fields, and the Earth is imperfect. So I came up with this new set of formulations so I could actually do that. But at the time, my master's thesis advisor, Dr. Wyckoff, said, no, you don't want to do that. Your theory is radical enough without having a whole new set of gravitational formulations. So I just left those out, and I got my thesis, But afterwards, I finished them all up and had done that. And so basically, because Mars, the Earth spins, and by the way, I could tell you the story, but pretty much every anti-satellite missile, anti-missile system, every hypersonic missile, they all use this mathematical formulation, not Newton's. So yeah, and almost all the ballistic missiles too. This was 25 years ago, right? So pretty much everybody uses it because you can't patent formulations, by the way, and once they got out there, everybody used it. There's a whole story on that, but we don't need to go into that.
Gotcha.
But anyway, the thing we get back to Mars Polar Orbiter is Mars bulges out even more. We're like, the Earth is 0.3% oblate. Mars is 0.5% oblate. And so it bulges out, and gravity is actually compressive. Gravity is not caused by the planet pulling you in, it's caused by the sky pushing down on you. It's a compressive force, if you want to call it a force at all. And so you can think of this in two ways. This is like a theoretical mind concept. Like under the Newtonian, the classical Newtonian thing, let's say this is a mind concept. Let's imagine that the Earth and the Moon, right, they're orbiting, and the rest of the universe disappears, right? Mm-hmm. In the Newtonian thing, the Earth and the Moon would continue to orbit each other for eternity, right? Sure, the Earth's rotation would slow down, the Moon would slowly move away until they become gravity locked, like 36 billion years from now. But at that point, it would last forever, right? It would just eternity. They would be there for eternity. Now, the concept is gravity is caused by all of the matter of the universe interacting with all the matter in the universe. It's like the van der Waals force, for those who would understand that concept. That's kind of what it is. And so in this concept, the compressional concept, and I'm not the one that came up with this concept, by the way. It's a long-standing one. In this case, if the Earth and the Moon, if the rest of the universe disappeared, both of them would immediately blow up because the force of gravity would drop to nothing. And of course, there's a lot of pressure because gravity makes a lot of pressure at the center of the Earth and the center of the Moon, right? And if that pressure was immediately released, well, both the Earth and the Moon would explode into like a mass of gas and dust and forever fill the universe. And that's the other type of gravity, which is really the way gravity works. Gravity is a consequence of all of the matter in the universe interacting, kind of working together. It'd be quantum entanglement, I guess you would call it.
Okay.
And so that's, anyway, I got off a little off there, but that was just to give people a concept of how that is and why the theory works and all that. So when landing on Mars, they're going to put the Mars polar in, but Mars is more oblate. And I went and, Mars polar lander crashed, right? So I went looking to see why did it happen. So it's been scraped, by the way, if you go looking now. Funny how that happens. And I discovered that NASA was using a Newtonian gravitation to estimate Mars polar gravity to land. And the problem is that because the gravity is compressive, gravity is actually less near the Mars poles than a Newtonian with that perfectly spherical field. I mean, I'm not putting Newton down. You can actually derive Newton's formulations from my formulations. What he did is he made an infinitesimal point, right? What I did is I made an infinitesimal line, through the diameter of the planet. Mm-hmm. So I used the basic concept. I just made a line, right? It's not that hard. It's pretty easy, actually. And so gravity was actually less there than their calculations. And so this is kind of how they landed on Mars. They come in, it's moving really fast, right? So they have a heat shield. They burn the heat shield, which slows it down. And then when it gets slow enough, parachutes pop off, and that slows it down even further, and the heat shield drops away to hit the Mars surface someplace. And then that slows it down as it gets deeper and deeper to Mars atmosphere. And at some point, 4 kilometers above the Mars surface, the parachutes are released and the retro rockets fire off. So now we're trying, the spacecraft is slowing down as it gets closer and closer. Well, if you estimate Mars gravity is like 0.5% off, less or more than it actually is, and what was supposed to happen was the Mars polar lander was supposed to get, 10 to 20 meters above the ground. Then terminal guidance would kick in and guide it that last little bit. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're burning for 0.5 kilometer and you're burning 0.5% wrong, you're not going to be 10 to 20 meters off the ground. When that thing kicks in, you're going to be you could be over 100 meters off the ground. And we don't really know whether it exceeded the computer's capacity to think, or it just ran out of fuel, but it crashed, right? Which was sad. But the thing is, I used to go to Mars Society all the time, and they still have it every now and then. In fact, I'd recommend people to go. I used to sit there, and I used to go sit because I would go sit with the scientists, other scientists, and we'd all drink beers, and some of them would talk about this, some of them talk about what the gray aliens were doing down at the secret space base, and when scientists get drinking and they know there's nobody listening around. Anyway, we get cool stories come out. So I knew Dr. Peterson.
What are the gray aliens doing at the secret space base, by the way?
Oh, they were just helping with technology. Okay. I can't even remember what it was. Some helping them make the flying saucer craft work better. The U.S. does have alien reproduction vehicles. Right, and they have one. They've gone to Mars and back. Right, the whole rocket thing is bogus. Sorry, guys. It's an illusion.
Technology.
Yeah, I mean, they had one like you heard of the Norton Air Force Base. I worked at Norton Air Force Base for a while. But they didn't invite me. That was back in '86, where they had the alien reproduction vehicles and all the big, well, everybody's heard, well, maybe not everybody's heard the story, but if you haven't, go look it up online. You'll hear about it. And, they've evidently taken one of those things all through the planets, right, of the solar system. I don't think the guys that came back, they probably died of radiation poisoning, but, oh well. What do you got to do for exploration? And so they got, and there's Dr. Stephen Greer, and he has all of his whistleblowers. He's got hundreds of them that have come forward with stories of this stuff, right? This is not, fantasy science fiction. This is just massive fact that go listen to Dr. Stephen Greer and his shows and all that. He's not the perfect guy, but I like Stephen Greer, and he's certainly done a lot of work, and we do need to give him credit for that.
So let's talk about these alien crafts here for a second, because this is fantastic. This is really interesting. Are these are reverse engineered crafts that we've built that were inspired by them?
Yeah, I mean, Townsend Brown figured it out. All right, a long time ago, he built metal flying saucer crafts. Maybe the Nazis had them too, right? There's that whole story. And basically what you do is you put a positive charge on your little flying saucer craft. You got a negative charge around a high voltage charge. And it was called the electronic wind. I've got an electronic wind air purifier in my house, right? I have an electrogravity device in my house because the electric wind, they said, oh, it's just the air flowing off the surface of the disk that causes lift, right? Well, they put it in a vacuum chamber and it kept flying. So obviously it's moving the superfluidic vacuum, right? It's, causing a lift, right? It's lift in a vacuum. Okay, that's impossible, but there it is. Townsend Brown was doing it. And you can go look up Dr. Townsend Brown on the internet, and they got you can just read all day for a week, right? So you don't need to I don't need to go further than that. So that's easy enough to do. We figured it out, but I think there's probably other things that they've done. And, there's probably the Eisenhower cut a deal with some bad aliens, because who would really want to work with Earth humans, especially the Americans, blowing up cities with nukes and stuff, except for like kind of bad, rotten aliens like Americans are bad, rotten, whatever. Anyway, so they have a whole problem working with maybe not the best type, because most of the other ones said, no, you need to stop blowing people up with nuclear weapons and taking this pathway. Yeah. But then the other one said, oh, we don't care. We'll give you even better cool stuff to blow more people up with. And we'll share technology as long as, let us maybe abduct people and do experiments with them and, whatever. Yeah.
Move them some underground base somewhere.
Whatever. Yeah. We know the stories and, are they real? Some of them probably are. Some of them aren't. So, but anyway, I knew Dr. Peter Smith. So he was the head of what is called the Phoenix Lander. And the Phoenix Lander was the exact same platform as the Mars Polar Lander. Maybe a couple of different, I think he was running out of issue, wherever it was. It had a few more different instruments, but they're going to land the same lander in the same latitude. And of course, they were going to have the same crash. So I wrote him a letter and showed him the gravity formulations and how NASA was getting it wrong. And he wrote me back and said he couldn't believe that JPL and NASA couldn't get gravity right. But what happened is when the parachute breaks away and the retro rockets start, he made sure the radar altimeter was working, right? And so it could adjust that 4 kilometers. So and the Phoenix Lander landed successfully, and it was the one that discovered water on Mars, liquid water on Mars during a frost thing of the day. And the frost landed, and then the frost melted, and there was actually liquid water and stuff. So that saved the United States a few $100 million. Not that I got a big thank you from NASA, but oh well. At least the Phoenix Lander worked. But that's not the end of the story. As you know, last year we had 4 probes attempted to get to the moon.
Yeah, the Indians and the Russians and the Chinese and
the Americans.
And the Americans.
The Japanese, yes, and then the Americans. Chinese already have my math. So anyway, there's one story. Lander. Yeah, so they already know how to land a moon. But the other ones, basically what I was doing is it was last year, and I was looking at there was the Hakuto R mission, and that was by iSpace. It's like a private Japanese company, and it had crashed on the lunar surface, probably because they couldn't measure lunar gravity. Oh, I probably should talk about lunar gravity, shouldn't I? Okay.
Remember gravity? What's the gravity?
I talked about the Earth being an oblate sphere, right? Because it spins and it kind of causes the thing to blow up. Well, it's different with the moon. The moon is a gravity-locked object. It takes one rotation for one orbit. And now normally we see the moon, it looks like a sphere to us, right? Mm-hmm. But actually, if you were to look at the moon from the side, this is greatly exaggerated, of course, for the purpose of doing it. It has this egg shape. It has its egg shape for those people listening. So that's actually what if you were to look at the moon from the side in orbit, that's what it would kind of look like. This is greatly exaggerated, by the way, folks, just to let you know, but it's for educational purposes. So when we look at the moon, it looks pretty damn round to us, but it really isn't. And like when we went to the moon, when we if you actually look at a moon globe or anything, when they said, oh, well, if we're going to go to the moon, we're just going to put a north pole up here and a south pole down here, just like the Earth. And that's going to work. No, folks, it doesn't work that way. Because you have to, well, at least with my math, you have to, with their math, which doesn't work anyway, it doesn't matter, right? But with this, actually, first you have to map the moon again, right, differently. So really what you have, instead of having a north and a south pole, you have the near Earth pole. That is the part of the moon closest to the Earth, right? Mm-hmm. And then on the back side of the moon, you have a far Earth pole. And the rim that we see, right, is actually the equator. So when you're looking at the moon, you see that's the pole. And this is the same for any oblate. Like every moon in our solar system is gravitationally locked. One rotation for one orbit, right? That's the way it's got to be. And so if you're going to do any landing on any of those things or the asteroid, you need to use my math. But first, before you do anything at all, you got to do the mapping. So what you would do is you would have to redo the mapping so that, you get your latitudes and longitudes, right? And it comes off that near Earth point, and then the rim we see is actually the equator, and also the same for the far Earth pole. And because with the moon, gravity is actually stronger on its near Earth, far Earth pole equator than it is on the near, because it's longer between the poles and shorter across the equator, and that causes gravity to be stronger at the equator, then their math goes, okay? And that's just the way. And then you apply math. Anyway, you can go see my new, I think I gave it to you, I'll give you the link, new Newtonian formulations for gravity, right? So anyway, so I discovered that. I said, oh man, and when I researched that, and then when I was doing it, I suddenly discovered that the Indians were going to send Chandrayaan-3 to land on the moon like a month and a half later, and the other thing is I discovered iSpace headquarters is actually 10 miles from me. Oh, really? Up at Centennial Airport, because they kind of want to get off Colorado Springs and the U.S. military defense budget. They're going to suck a little tit on that one, see if they get some money. So that's why their headquarters was there. So I went down there and gave them the information and all that stuff so that they had it, and they pass it up to the higher levels in Japan. And anyway, did they use it or not? Probably not. But anyway, so what I did is, because I found out that Chandrayaan-3 was going to land on the moon, and I just happened to have a friend who happened to have contacts with the Indian defense contractors who had contacts with the ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization. So I was able to give them all the information about how the moon should be mapped and all the mathematical formulations they need to land on the moon. Because if you're going to try to land on the pole of the moon. Now, imagine, they all have radar altimeters that could tell you how far above the moon you are, right? That's easy enough to do, but it's hard to adjust for horizontal movement. So if gravity is higher, because when you want to land, let's say this is the landing, the surface. Here, here's your book, by the way. Do you have a new book?
Well, I have a new version of it.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, okay, cool, yes. I recommend his book. So
thank you.
So if you're going to land on the surface, the surface of the moon, you want to make sure when you come down, your vertical and horizontal is exactly zero. Well, if the gravity on the moon's, quote, it's called the South Pole, because that's where they think some ice is hanging out. Well, if gravity is actually higher, it's as if the surface was higher. So you're going to come down, and you can adjust your vertical, but you're not going to be able to adjust that horizontal, so you're going to come in with a little bit of horizontal speed, okay? Well, the Indians didn't have that problem, and so they were able to land successfully on the moon. But then there were those sneaky Russians, and this is actually a parable for our age. Some of you that were children that back in the days when you were properly educated, there's an old parable story of the tortoise and the hare.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar? You'll probably remember that and had as a kid.
I am familiar with it, yes.
If some of the younger listeners that didn't read the fairy tale stories from our, European heritage, or actually Greek heritage, but anyway, that's probably something to go back to. But there's this tortoise and the hare, and they were going to do a race. And the tortoise starts off to do a very slow, methodical, and heading toward the hare was just saying, "I'm so fast, I don't have to do anything." And and he was just lagging around and blah. I'm sorry, party breaker or whatever they call that. The tortoise wins, right, and the hare loses. And the same thing with the Russians, because the Russians already have my math. Everybody has my math. They didn't understand though the mapping of the moon, so they have spies in the ISRO, friendly spies, I guess. And once they learned about this new method, they said, "Oh man, we can't let the Indians get to the South Pole first." So they pulled this old spacecraft they'd had sitting on the shelf for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And so the Indians did it they launched it off the Earth. They went around the Earth like 4 or 5 times, right? Each time it's giving it like a little bit more energy till just got enough energy to leave the orbit of the Earth and head toward the moon. And then they were going to get to the moon, and they were going to, go several, many times around the moon, each time getting a little closer before they could land, right? Very slow, very methodical. The Russians, they're going to do that. I said, so they pulled this old thing off, they stuck it on a rocket, and they just fired it straight off the moon, and they were going to land like a day before the Indians were going to do, right? So they come straight off the moon, the hare, going, instead of the tortoise, they get to the moon, and they get in one orbit, and they did a retro to get in that orbit, and then they were going to do the second orbit. And the story is that there was a computer glitch on their spacecraft, and instead of burning like 46 seconds, it burned 108 or whatever. And that put too much energy, and it smacked into the moon rather than get into orbit. That's at least the story. And it may be true, but the problem is it's just like it's just that, all the guys that worked on that project, it'd been sitting they all gone off other jobs, right? Because it's been sitting on the shelf for 10 or 15 years. And so these guys didn't really know what they do. And anyway, they crashed it, but the Russians crashed it, and then the Indians came down and landed successfully. But that's not the whole story. There were still 2 space probes going last year. And one was the Japanese SIM moonlander. And so they were coming in to try to land on the moon. And we don't really know. There was allegedly one of the nozzles broke off on the lander, and that maybe caused it to crash. But in any case, it came in and ended up upside down, which it was still working.
Great.
But it was upside down. So, and it did survive the lunar night a couple of times. So you could see it's upside down. It could do some of its things, and it dropped a couple of landers like a certain amount of feet above the ground. They bounced little bouncy ball thingies that could get on the moon's surface in case the lander crashed. And anyway, they worked. But there was a problem with like the solar panels weren't. Anyway, so I guess it was a semi-successful landing. And but they did have my math, and they could have maybe were going to use it, but probably not. The Japanese, I don't have a PhD. I only have a master and not piled higher and deeper, so I may not have the authority to actually be, smart enough to be considered at all. But then there's the Americans and NASA. This private company did a deal with NASA, and it was called Odysseus Moonlander. And of course, the U.S. military has my stuff, but NASA would, who am I? Why would they listen to me? So anyway, we don't even waste our time trying to talk to those guys. So they came in, the Odysseus came in, and because they can adjust, they got the radar altimeter, right? Or here, I better not do that. I'll spill my water. And their spacecraft comes down, and they can adjust the vertical, but they couldn't adjust the horizontal. So it comes down and falls up on its side, plunk, and that was the end of that mission. And they really didn't recover. So that's why, because it couldn't adjust for the horizontal and crashed near this moon's south pole. But we have more fun stuff coming up this year. This year is going to be a very busy year for more. Yeah, they're going to wrap up with SpaceX just launched 2 landers. NASA, or
is it Blue Origin or SpaceX?
Blue
or who's
Ghost
doing
lander
it?
and the Firefly lander. And also iSpace. Well, Blue Ghost lander has Firefly lander, and then iSpace is launching a Resilience. That's it. It's going to the iSpace. The guys that down the street from me, they're launching that private company, Japanese private public. So they're going to try to land on the moon again, and I think probably near the South Pole, and then the Blue Ghost mission with, I think it's the Firefly lander, and also Intuitive Machines is going to do the IM-2 mission to the South Pole. They're going to have a lander too. So there's going to be 3 attempted landings on the South Pole of the moon, and I don't know,
why? Why?
Ice.
What do they want? What are they trying to do?
In the South Pole of the moon, there are like craters that have always through history, geologic history, have been in darkness. And so there's a lot of like comets and stuff hit the moon, and they've actually discovered they had a radar. One of the lunar missions went down there with a radar with certain frequencies that reflect off water. And they discovered water in the bottom of some of these lunar craters in the South Pole of the moon. And so if they want to send people to the moon, it's really good to have something to drink. So the first human, if they were going to do that, not that it may not happen, you'd want water. And so the only place you're going to find water is basically the South Pole of the moon and these certain craters. And probably what they do is they cover the bottom of the crater with plastic and then shine light on it, and the water would evaporate, like one of those solar stills.
Yeah.
And so that the lunar astronauts could get enough to drink. That's basically the plan. But first you got to get there and land. And so since none of these guys, I know that iSpace with its resilience, I gave them the math and everything, but will they use it? I don't know. Maybe not, because it's a hierarchical thing. We have, you have to know somebody in the Japanese like 10 years before, you're even considered, to the next level. They're a very closed society. So
they shouldn't have whacked Stanley Miller. They could have used his car that drives on water on the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look at Osawa and Kushi. Those were Japanese researchers which discovered Moxie fusion in late 1950s, early 60s. If they had not been suppressed, we would have had working fusion reactors in the early 70s, right? I didn't come up with metal oxygen fusion. Yeah. All I did was just confirm Osawa and Kushi's original discovery, and then the Scotia group with the University of Valencia doubly confirmed Osawa and Kushi's, and confirmed that my confirmation was also legitimate. So hats off to Osawa and Kushi, but they got suppressed because at that time, Japan was an occupied country, still is, by the way, and the government's not really that legitimate, and anyway, you know how that is. And so they had gotten suppressed because at the time, the U.S. was going to put in basically, the Fukushima type fission reactors, the one that melted down, which are really nothing more than reactors, the nuclear reactors in submarines. They basically just pull it out of the submarine, stick it on the ground, and of course it has inherent safety flaws, as we know, right? And so it's not like a Russian reactor or even some of the American reactors. It's this cheap-ass reactor design that has had some really serious flaws, which obviously at one time came to show just how flawed they were. So so we could have had. It's like Dr. Greer talks about. Dr. Stephen Greer is there's that lost century, the lost century of technologies that have been suppressed.
Yeah, that's the crime of the century, is the suppression of technology that could have reshaped humanity, because we're so fixated on petroleum and the oil industry and these guys that, the Rockefellers that want, to control all these resources. I can't even imagine the world we would live in if it were well established that we had free energy and that people had access to it. It would be so much different. Ken, where is the best place for people to check out your stuff, to find out more, all the geeks? You have a way of making us all feel like we need to go take another science class, but where's the best place for people to find your work?
Well, it's Moxie Fusion, MOXI Fusion on ResearchGate. And I have a site there with Gary Rodriguez, and he's got all kinds of stuff. I've got all kinds of stuff. In fact, there's all kinds of great stuff on ResearchGate, because there's a lot of these scientific journals will not publish anything that doesn't conform to, the existing paradigm, right? ResearchGate is a German company, And so you can go to ResearchGate, and there is all kinds of great, cool technologies and scientific discoveries that you're not going to get in the standard journals. Mine's just one, right? Mine, the site's pretty cool, and I certainly want you to go visit it, but kind of wander around ResearchGate and look at all the other cool stuff. Just type in interesting subjects you maybe want to learn about, and you can it's one of those, it's like the new way things are going, the new science, right? Uncontrolled science. It's there are people, it's a lot easier to make money, let's say making gold and other things using Moxie fusion reactors in your garage. Just be careful, or your outbuilding probably is a better place to do it. And so this is not hidden technology. In fact, I have other talks where I get more involved in it, but it's easy enough to do. And also you could do all that stuff's available, right? You don't have to. It doesn't cost billions of dollars. You don't have to have multiple PhDs. It's pretty simple stuff, and anybody can do it. Stanley did it. Stanley left his patents. All you got to do is and there's a bunch of Stanley guys out there doing it. So this is stuff you don't have. It's not you don't have to worry about it. You can do it yourself. This is decentralized energy. This is decentralized metal productions. And if you use like zirconium hafnium oxide, you can buy it 50 cents a pound. You can make the whole platinum group of metals. And I've given a talk about that. So, the Moxie fusion allows you to make all kinds of cool stuff. Other things, you can make various rare earth metals. It's like they whine about, the Chinese have cut us off from gadolinium and germanium. Well, you can just take some manganese oxide, one of the most common minerals, and you can Moxie fusion it into all the germanium and gadolinium you want and sell it to the U.S. government, It's
Great.
It's not. This is not very complicated science, and it was discovered, in fact, decades ago.
Well, for those of you out there looking for a side hustle, you can make some rare earth minerals and sell them out at the swap meet to the American government. Or maybe Ken, you can teach me when we're in Mexico next week. You can teach me how to.
If they've got time, I'll be happy to get a little talk at Anarchapulco. But
for sure, you can teach.
Everything's open source. Bad things happen to Stanley Meyer, and bad things happen to all these other people. So I just open sourced it to everyone. It's been downloaded almost 10,000 times, and everybody knows about it. There's lots and lots of videos I've talked about this. So you don't need me. Anybody, maybe not anybody could do it, but certainly competent individuals can do this rather easily.
Well, I'd love to see your presentation on how to turn a microwave into an EMP. We can get into that the next time around. That's Ken the scientist, everybody. Listen, man, you've got the information on stuff that is way out of my area of expertise, but I appreciate it anyway. If you guys want to connect with me, you can go to macroaggressions.io and activistpost.com. Hopefully you've bookmarked that. That's a great spot for all your daily news. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again. And C60 power as well. Get your C60 power. Discount code macro. Yep. Check it out. It's good. It's so good. Your cat will beg for it. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.